We will now hear from AWBI's Executive Director to share the launch of AWBI's newest initiative, which is so exciting, 1,000 Black businesses.
If you want me, you can find me in the air.
Just so many progressive things have happened for African Americans here in the city of Atlanta, and one of which is the growth in Black businesses.
While the average business is valued at, Black-owned business is valued at $58,000, that's compared to $658,000 for a white-owned business.
We know no one is coming to the SWATs to save us. With the pandemic, we've had a lot more Black-owned businesses. I think they're closing at twice the rate of our white counterparts that have experienced it in real time. And so if the need was great before the pandemic, the need is really great now.
If the average Black business on a yearly makes between 30 and 40,000, then the question is, who can you hire? You can't hire HR. You can't hire an accountant. You can't hire a marketer. You can't hire someone to support you in merchandising. And most importantly, you can't hire yourself. And so when those inequities, when Black businesses are not, when you have a Black business making 30 to 40,000 per year and a white-owned business 600,000 per year, it is virtually impossible. And so Black businesses are forced to be sole proprietors. 96% of businesses in Atlanta are sole proprietors. So having those shared professional services literally says on a line item, now you have an attorney, now you have an accountant, now you have someone that is going to help you if you were a brick and mortar location that now you're forced due to the pandemic to operate in an e-commerce space. Pro bono services, shared professional services, because it is hard to be able to do those things when you cannot afford it.
I'm a service provider. When we are successful in helping 1,000 Black-owned businesses employ people in 1,000 days, it's going to give not only the business owners and their employees hope, a new business network, but it's also going to give everyone in Atlanta and in other parts of the country the realization that you can do whatever you want to do as long as you're intentional about it and you bring everybody to the table.
Few cities have experienced growth on par with Atlanta. According to a recent census report, Atlanta saw the third highest population gains in 2017, surpassed only by Houston and Dallas. While many factors contribute to the influx, the promise of economic opportunity is one of the strongest draws. In a recent study by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Atlanta earned the second highest boom rate among big city economies and is home to one of the highest number of Fortune 500 headquarters in the country. Atlanta continues to attract employers and employees alike. Unfortunately, however, as I shared this morning, not everyone benefits. Today, Atlanta is the #2 city for income inequality in America, just behind San Juan, Puerto Rico. The average Black-owned business is worth $58,000 compared to $658,000 for white-owned businesses. Moreover, 96% of Black-owned businesses in Atlanta have no paid employees, leaving little room for growth beyond day-to-day sustenance, though they still represent an important economic driver for our economy and may have seasonal, project-based, or long-term 1099 employees. Small businesses are the driving force of the American economy. According to the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy, new businesses account for nearly all new job growth, with small companies accounting for 65% of new jobs created. Atlanta leads the nation in Black entrepreneurs per capita. However, due to structural and systemic barriers, Black-owned businesses are not reaching their full potential. Growth of Black-owned businesses presents an on-ramp to collective prosperity that goes beyond the immediate gain of an individual business owner. Moreover, fostering a strong Black-owned business ecosystem works to close the racial wealth gap, which in turn will reduce inequities and disparities among economic, social, and political spheres. To support this effort, Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative is excited to officially launch Advancing Enterprise Prosperity, 1,000 Black businesses in 1,000 days. The campaign will support 1,000 African American owned businesses in 1,000 days by helping 1,000 businesses hire their first employee or offer living wage just to staff already employed. This is an ambitious goal that hinges on identifying Black-owned businesses and high-growth sectors that are in a position to hire an additional employee. The approach will focus on established and scalable businesses operating in high-growth sectors where the businesses are located and or the owner lives in Southeast, Southwest, and Northwest Atlanta, as well as along the Beltline overlay. AWBI's strategy to underpin 1,000 Black businesses will devote human capital, professional services, technical assistance, and funding centered on business growth and scale, neighborhood level workforce development, and retention and anti-displacement strategies. The growth and scale pillar focuses on anchor procurement, integrated capital, thought leadership, shared professional services, which will include hiring a procurement consultant to help businesses submit successful bids, as well as peer networks and social capital to better prepare and position businesses for growth. The workforce pillar focuses on supporting holistic neighborhood-level workforce development partnerships. It will do so by convening practitioners, providing funding for services, amplifying those available services throughout the community, and supporting human resources technical assistance for business owners. The retention and anti-displacement pillar focuses on strategic advising, equitable land use and development advocacy efforts, providing resource acquisition support, land acquisition, and pro bono business succession and estate planning to ensure legacy businesses can age in place, growth stage businesses can expand in place, and there is affordable commercial physical space available for both. As a former business owner and estate planning attorney, I recognize the importance proper planning plays in a successful transition for any business to minimize interruption or impact on the hard-earned goodwill a business owner and the business's workers have developed over the years. We also recognize the importance of planning for a successful exit, whether it's through acquisition, conversion to a worker-owned model, or as part of the business owner's lasting legacy and generational wealth creation. Through these strategies, this initiative will, among other impacts, increase revenue of Black-owned businesses, increasing the number of employees earning at or above living wage, promote more equitable neighborhood revitalization, and mitigate commercial displacement. It would also increase capacity in local small business service providers and increase social and integrated capital among Black-owned businesses. The campaign not only creates more living wage jobs and builds family and community wealth, it also presents an opportunity to increase the financial strength of new and legacy-owned Black-owned businesses and supports AWBI's mission to close the racial wealth gap in Atlanta while serving as a national model for community wealth building. Furthermore, AWBI's strategies tackle Atlanta's racial and spatial opportunity gaps, which have been underscored by the recent economic disruption caused by the COVID pandemic. We are so excited to launch this initiative today and happy to share our current and potential partners for what will be Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative's seminal work for the next 3 years. These potential and existing partners include for growth and scale partners, is listed above. Workforce partners include those listed here. And retention and anti-displacement partners are listed above. We are excited that many of you are here with us today. Among our partners, I'd like to invite Alan Anderson, Vice President for University Partnerships at Emory University, to join me to discuss the first phase of our campaign, Growth and Scale.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Alan. Welcome. We are excited to have you here with us today. For the audience's benefit, Alan is responsible for developing and leading an enterprise-wide local community engagement strategy at Emory, and he serves on the board for Neighborhood Nexus. So, Alan, the day has finally come. We've been working on this partnership with Emory and Emory Healthcare as part of our 1,000 Black Businesses launch since October. Could you share a bit about why this type of partnership was important from your perspective based on your organization's strategic focus?
Yeah, so first off, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful event. I have learned so much, and it's just been awesome to be a part of such an enriching event, and thankful to be in a position to share a bit about Emory and kind of why we're leaning in on this. So the first thing I'll just note is that Emory University and Emory as an employer is the largest employer in our region. And so just by that nature, we recognize we have an important obligation to be more engaged and be truly an anchor in this community. And so some of the efforts that have kind of gotten us underway was spending some time thinking through our strategy around where we want to engage. And there are kind of three strategic areas that we're focusing in on. There's one related to health and well-being, a second related to social and economic mobility, and then the third related to art, science, and cultural enrichment. And then that second pillar, specifically around social and economic mobility, the work with AWBI has just been absolutely aligned with that. As we go through our overall strategy and think about ways in which we diversify the ways in which we engage, not only from the kind of supplier development perspective and supplier diversity and vendor acquisition, but also things around our hiring, things around our investments, things around how we look at capital. And we recognize that we have a lot to learn. And so it's been really great to connect with AWBI to give us the kinds of guidance, share expertise from other markets that'll help us think through strategically how we want to go about this process. And, we kicked off our partnership back in October. So for the last 6 months, it's been really great to dig in and start to kind of really brainstorm ways in which we can focus our efforts. And gives us, and AWBI has been really great at giving us new guidance around how best to go about our approach.
So part of our strategy is to engage in and push where necessary, anchor institutions to reimagine their procurement practices to create a more equitable overall general procurement process, not as a supplier diversity initiative, but for general procurement. But I'm pleased to share we did not have to push Emory at all. Could you share a bit about your philosophy that has created an environment so committed to analyzing and finding ways to shift and expand?
So, the first thing I have to just acknowledge is that in August of last year, we brought on our new president, President Finvez. And President Finvez, from the moment he arrived, made it very clear he wanted to be very much engaged in Atlanta. And he views a lot of the conversations we had earlier today around addressing issues of social justice and racial inequities as a priority for him. He literally this week gave a town hall State of the Union for the university, and he very much emphasized the importance of this work and knows it's a critical element. And so I say that to say leadership matters. And so when you have leadership within your organization that is very focused on this type of work and wants to ensure that it's happening, it makes the job of the folks who might be working in central procurement a lot easier, because there's already this strategic will to see the value of this work, to see that this work is very much mission aligned and ultimately drive us towards the outcomes we want. And so from there, having that kind of strategic leadership, one of the things that we really wanted to dig in on is building our plan and ultimately start to understand the landscape of where we're at, what kinds of activities we've done thus far, start to get a handle on what are some of those big goals and what are the values that we want to make sure that we're living through in our actions, so that we can actually design specific tactics that will allow us to execute and get to our place where we want to be as an institution and as an enterprise. And that's one of the huge advantages of working with AWBI, because we know what we aspire to be, but we also know that we need to get connected to certain types of resources. We need to get connected to the right types of people. We need to also just kind of learn the practices that others may be doing that are further along, so that we can be that much more efficient and effective in our outcomes.
You raise an interesting point, because we often talk about the importance of social capital for business owners. But really, in taking on any new endeavor, there is benefit in connectivity. And as our role during this for this pillar and just overall the continuum of support that we intend to create and provide for businesses with 1,000 Black businesses and the partners that are participating. For the growth and scale pillar, one of those items is centered around, as you alluded to, creating some connectivity just based on our Anchor Collaborative Network and other networks that we have plugged into over time, and bringing those partners in who have been doing this for longer to share their experiences and their learnings and lessons learned through the process and ways to do it more efficiently, which as an ecosystem, not just locally but nationally, that's a critical part of with each iteration of these sorts of policies to do it better each time. But part of our role is also to, in addition to working with the anchors, to work with the small businesses to make sure that they have social capital and access to resources and expertise that have done it before them, back office support to help them figure out how to implement it efficiently, and to also introduce them to capital providers or provide capital so they can be prepared for these opportunities as they present themselves. I know you have a wealth of experience, and I won't go into all of it beyond your role here at Emory, but could you share a little bit from your perspective the importance of having a centralized organization or person or body who's really looking at the full landscape of needs and trying to coordinate it for a continuous or continuum process of support?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question, because the thing that we recognize is that we can't do this alone, and we realize that this work is extremely challenging, and so one of the things that I have, at least in terms of my own experiential background, to lean on is I originally relocated here a few years ago from Chicago and worked with another backbone organization, an organization that provided the kind of strategic support for the institution I was at in the Chicago area, to really help us think through strategically how we were able to kind of redefine our engagements, redefine our hiring, specifically look at our Black businesses opportunities, and ultimately created all kinds of pathways, including a skills trades trainee program, as well as a number of business diversity efforts that allowed for more businesses to gain access to opportunities, working with, that was Northwestern University. And as I relocated here and recognized that the opportunity was very similar and had a lot of synergistic similarities with the fact that both institutions were private, both institutions were kind of neighbors to large urban centers, and recognized that the ability to be an anchor was a critical element. And so just from building upon those learnings, one of the things that we recognize pretty early on is that it takes the entire enterprise to really be engaged in this work. So when you think about particularly our business school, for example, and the fact that there's a business and society institute that's been recently formed, and a lot of the social enterprise programs like Start Me, which is really helping micro enterprises get the kinds of skills that they need to be ultimately successful, and kind of growing that small business to a place where they can actually bring on employees, they can actually generate wealth. These are critical elements, and being in a position to kind of not only be a part of that network, but to also work with other collaboration, other units within our larger ecosystem to kind of gain access and insights around how they're helping entrepreneurs gain access to capital. Thinking also creatively within our overall university around how we're actually providing capital where possible, based on different opportunities to invest in these businesses beyond just the skill development, but also to make kind of financial contributions to allow them to grow and thrive. So these are the kinds of things that we're developing, we're piloting, we're growing, but we know we can do more. At the end of the day, we have a large spend in our region, and we know that strategically some of those decisions that we've made in the past have kind of just followed into kind of redoing what we've done in the past, and not necessarily had the kind of equity lens that we're really focusing in on much more at a greater sense of urgency than maybe we have in the past. And I think that's opening the table, which allows us to be in a better position to help support some of these businesses thrive in our region.
Mhm. I'm glad you mentioned capital and love to hear a little bit more about that as well, because in talking to capital providers, we often emphasize that Black-owned businesses, because of the historical and systemic policies that have impacted Black people's ability to garner wealth, and then share that either with the next generation or to leverage it for their own endeavors. Black-owned businesses or Black business owners are often forced to be creative in the early stages of attempting to finance their companies because they don't have the same level of access to friends and family capital or early stage seed capital to establish their businesses. As a result, even when the businesses become successful and they have been able to generate the level of revenue required to service debt or to reinvest into their companies in a way that could really stimulate growth, we note that they've often had to be creative in their finances, and as a result, they show up differently. And we've done our part to be very intentional with the Community Loan Fund and the grant program I mentioned earlier today that we launched with COVID, and we'll continue to offer products like that, where there's an understanding not only of the impact of that business on the community or what the business looks like on paper in terms of their revenue, but also the steps that they've had to take and causing them to show up a little bit differently when it's time for additional financing. And that's really important, we found, because it's part of 1,000 Black businesses in our work overall. So we really focus on growth stage, scalable, established businesses, but they really are businesses that I refer to as kind of the missing middle. And they tend to be businesses that are beyond the incubator, accelerator phase. They don't need a curriculum or in that sort of support, or they've already graduated from those kinds of programs, but they also are not kind of on a first name basis with their banker, if they have a banker at all, or their CPA doesn't call them when there's an opportunity like PPP that comes to bear. And so they are the missing middle in that they need really dedicated one-on-one expertise to coach them through. And we've done some funding for that for the businesses that we supported last year. And we'll continue to support that kind of technical assistance and access to technical expertise. But also, I also refer to them kind of the but-for group of businesses, but for some additional capital, they could hire a new person or really take advantage of a new procurement opportunity, for example. So with that in mind, and that was kind of a big framework, but that kind of understanding is really at the root of our work and of 1,000 Black businesses. Can you share a little bit about, if you can, early thoughts around the capital piece in addition to the contracting and procurement piece? Whether it be related to payments or just access to capital to take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I will note. One is just a recognition of kind of, let's review our processes in general to make sure that we can create access to opportunity in general. And some of the ability for a business to thrive could just be built around how quickly they are able to receive payment terms. And so let's look about some practices that we can control immediately that don't even necessarily result in us necessarily providing capital, but can actually create more capital for the individual because they're able to get their money faster and therefore, as a result, be able to kind of build their business more quickly. Another aspect of that is, continuing to look at our requirements in terms of things like insurance. If you have someone coming to change a light bulb, do you really need, several $1 million of insurance, which is the same level that you might have for a person building an entire building? And so as we continue to think through strategic ways to kind of create more equitable processes to give folks access to opportunities to allow them to thrive, turn around payments more quickly, these are things that we're evaluating. At the same time, one of the things that I'll also note from the same business school coursework is that they have a philanthropy lab where they're specifically looking at different ways to make investments into businesses, specifically based on those individual organizations having certain needs. And one of the things that's pretty cool about that is the people who are ultimately making those kind of philanthropic decisions as students, they're getting trained in the kinds of methodology to be more equitable. In the same way that you would hope that some of these larger firms that have the ability to make financial decisions around creating access to capital would have an equity lens and other kinds of important features that they should be considering. These students are being trained in that and working very closely around how to do that, learning from experts in our region, specifically to be more equitable about those processes, where that can actually lend additional capital to businesses. So that's that aspect. And then the last thing I'll just say is one of the areas we're also looking at more closely is our investments overall and our investment instruments. And so when you think about our endowment, thinking about who are the folks that we're working with as investors, and then also are those investors in places where we can actually generate capital that can actually be infused to create wealth building opportunities for businesses. And so we're looking at all of these things because we recognize that there are multiple ways in which we can attack it based on the things that we control already. But just want to make sure that we're being more equitable about how we go about doing this work.
And I think you touched on a number of things that we discovered pretty quickly, because what began as a procurement partnership quickly expanded to exploring other ways to partner, such as with your Emory sustainability efforts and the work at Gazetta Business School, even though that Start Me and what is now the Gazetta Business and Society Institute are long-standing members of our community practice. Can you share a bit about, just from that, we discovered it pretty quickly, can you share a little bit about what is your vision for the possibilities for this partnership and this work, not only between our two organizations and entities, but just across the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, our vision is to be in a place where, we're looked upon and viewed as an expert at how you design this kind of work, right? And so as other anchors in our region look to engage, we want to put ourselves in a place where kind of ambitiously we can say, here's how you develop a process that creates more opportunities for businesses to be able to gain access to whether it be vendor opportunities, whether it be if you're a larger employer and you're a vendor of Emory, how do you actually create tier 2 opportunities to create additional opportunities for folks in that pipeline? As an employer, being even more strategic around who we're engaging and how we bring in talent from underserved areas throughout our communities with a very targeted hiring strategy and working in collaboration with various partners. We most recently, I can say very proudly, been working with Strive Atlanta, for example, to ultimately source talent to work in some of our operations. So I say that to say we're looking holistically, and we want to get into a place where as other institutions that may have a health system attached to them as well, we can think strategically around how to best go about doing that work and be a resource and a guide to others. Because at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that all of our practices create access to opportunity. I mean, a lot of the conversation that we've been hearing today is that there's just been limited access to opportunity over and over and over again. And a lot of these things are systemically put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. And we recognize, even in our own history, it would be remiss if I didn't say, we recognize that there are things that we need to reconcile in our own history as a university based on when it was founded and where it was founded. And so we need to acknowledge that, and we need to be better. And we are working to be better. But we want to also be a resource to show folks how better can be if you actually deliver on some of these actions that you're really focused in on. So I think that's really what it's about. It's like, hey, look, we know that we can be better, and we're going to start to demonstrate that action through the ways in which we're utilizing our resources, how we're being a member of the space to ultimately collaborate with others, how we're going to learn from what works and ultimately try to apply where applicable to the work of Emory. And that's where the value of AWBI is going to be huge for us, because we recognize it's not just being able to get access to a list. And sometimes people say, hey, just give me the list, give me the list, give me the list. It's also about thinking, hey, let's be strategic about this. How do we make sure that this is for the long game, as opposed to kind of short-term wins only, where we can just say, hey, we did something nice and we wrote a story about it. We want to be able to have the long game happen, where these things are kind of hardwired into the ways in which we do business in our community.
I'm glad you mentioned collaboration and expertise because that's what we emphasize that we bring to the table. In addition to that social capital piece with others that have other universities or anchors across the country that have done it before, but also just the expertise that we bring to the table related to how to better engage and create more equitable practices. From that perspective, but also in how to best prepare businesses for those opportunities. But I think the real value add we offer and provide at Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative is our focus on collaboration and connectivity. None of this we're trying to do on our own. We are working with and will continue to support our partners, some of which have been doing this work for years. The infrastructure that we are creating is this overarching approach to how do we, at a systems level, shift access to procurement opportunities and really the ability to fully engage in those opportunities, in addition to helping anchors reimagine their processes and pushing for that. So, for example, we will not provide a list. In whatever businesses we connect, we're very mindful of ensuring that that we stay connected with them so they can participate in an equitable process across the board, and that they are treated equitably from beginning to end, not just in opening the door for them to apply or submit an RFP. And just also in thinking about practical steps in implementing this kind of strategy. Growth and Pillars, our first step to focus on growth and scale is our first pillar to focus on revenue growth and preparation for the opportunities. But then workforce is a critical part of that. And you mentioned Strive, but there are other partners that we will be partnering with to help businesses find talent at their neighborhood level, help residents find jobs in their neighborhoods, and creating some holistic support around ensuring that those jobs can be maintained over time. And then the other component will be focused on retention and anti-displacement, because we can build the businesses and open opportunities, but if they can't afford to stay in Atlanta to do that work, or if they are not prepared to have access for a successful exit or transition when, say, a family member isn't available or interested in taking on that business, really have to start planning for that so we don't lose those gains from a wealth generation perspective for that community over time, and to maintain some continuity. So, for example, one thing we'll be doing is introducing or facilitating JV relationships to participate in the procurement process, but also in some cases introducing professionals who maybe don't want to start a business from scratch but are interested in buying a business with goodwill, or introducing worker-owned models, which will be an important component of the workforce and retention and anti-displacement work, on top of actually pursuing, preserving, and making sure there's affordable commercial space. One other thing that I wanted to make sure that we touched on really centers around, for those in our audience, and we only have a couple of minutes left, but for those in our audience who are interested in exploring this kind of opportunity, we've been intentional about making sure this was a prototype that we'd be dedicated to long term, to really explore the nuts and bolts of how we could expand it and what it could become, so it could be that model for others. If others are anchor institution representatives here in the audience who are considering this type of effort, what would you say to them to think about as they get started?
Yeah, so there's three things that I think are important when I look at successful organizations that have kind of done this, and so it would be very critical to identify three types of stakeholders that you need to build buy-in around. So there's the leadership level, and so identifying those folks who play the leadership role, who can kind of make it so, in the sense of saying, this is a priority, this is what we're going to focus in on, this is what matters. There is the folks who in some cases maybe play the role that I play, which is the kind of community agent, a person who has the relationships that could be either in an intergovernmental perspective or could be as a part of a community affairs, community relations kind of role. Who actually has the connections in the marketplace to kind of know who's there and to have those kinds of connections and connectivity. And then there's the folks who are the kind of internal strategic procurement folks, right? Who can manage and develop systems and processes to make sure that people gain access. And if you can get all three of those parties kind of aligned and synced around the prioritization, you can actually start to build strategies and plans that ultimately allow for the execution that you're hoping to achieve.
And we emphasized coming into the partnership that we wanted to ensure that we were in a position to get buy-in at all levels, because we have been advised by our established business owners as that is what it's really going to take to ensure that Black-owned businesses are a part of the general procurement process and really can engage at the level that they need to. Well, thank you so much, Alan, for joining me today, and thank you to our current and potential partners. We are excited about supporting the work that is already happening in the space, but also in creating innovative solutions together. We are ready to work and looking forward to doing so with all of you. If you'd like to learn more about advancing enterprise prosperity, 1,000 Black businesses in 1,000 days, or Atlanta wealth building initiatives, visit us online